Just a little drop.
Welcome to the conference in Jurmala on the criminalisation of nuclear war. I'm Christopher Busby. You may not recognise me because normally I wear beret. At the moment I'm wearing a Soviet Army helmet. And one of the reasons is to draw to your attention the fact that NATO has been brought into Latvia, which is now a front line in a proposed war against the Russian Republic, which might well result in nuclear war. And so that means that as a result of militarization, as a result of the introduction of huge amounts of money into this country, money that is being brought in on the back of tanks and missiles and armaments and helicopters and all of the paraphernalia of war, as a result of that we may end up in a conflict that will destroy everybody on Earth and all living systems. So let's be clear about this. And let's also be clear about the fact that none of this could occur if it were not for the fact that there was an enormous amount of money pumped into the system to create these weapons and to purchase these weapons. Money which comes from the international banking cartels. The international bankers have always been behind every single war, but right back to Napoleonic times or even before then. And make no mistake that the banking cartels are behind the proposed nuclear war, as I see it, as many of us see it. So this week, this day, we're going to concentrate on banking, but we're also going to talk about property, because one of the consequences of the creation of the monster that is the modern political state is the acquisition of land and property by people who seem to only want to acquire more land and property, resulting in enormous variations in income. People who are starving and people who are immensely rich and have so much land and property and cars and material and of course power that they don't know what to do with it. And in fact it doesn't make them happy. But the monster that has been created as a result of this economic system, one in which the banks are central and in which the people with enormous amounts of property and land operate the banking system to their advantage, is one of the links in the complicated chain that is going to result in nuclear war. And of course these people themselves will be killed. So what we have to talk about, or what we have to ask people to involve themselves with us, is a discussion about how it might be possible to dismantle this system. Now, long ago, in England, in 1649, some people who had no money decided to occupy the land and to dig it up, a man called Gerard Winstanley. And they were going to just take common land, or land that didn't belong to them, land that belonged to somebody else, and which wasn't being used, and just dig it up and grow crops for themselves and occupy the land. And this they did. And these people were called the diggers, and there was a song about them, which was written by Leon Rosselson, which is a very, very famous song, and which I recorded playing the nickel harper. So at the end of this, I can play you out with this song about how these people occupied the land and took it back to themselves. Because it seems to me that even a child at school would believe that the planet Earth is something that we all share in common, and that each one of us should receive the benefit from all of this land and ownership and the Earth and all of its treasures in proportion to the number of people who exist in the area. But of course this doesn't happen. What happens is that a few people own all of the land and everybody else is poor. So this is a message from the past in this song, which I hope you will listen to and think about. And perhaps even we could develop a system where we can do the same thing that the diggers did. So thank you very much for listening. And
what about the atomic weapon?
Sorry, what about the
UK and United States?
Oh yes, well I've been asked to say a few words about the beginning of the development of nuclear weapons. Now, I happen to know about this because I've studied it, and I've conducted and am at the moment conducting some court cases which which are about soldiers who were involved in the nuclear testing in the British Army. So the British did a lot of atmospheric nuclear testing. They blew up all their bombs in an island in the Pacific called Christmas Island, a little island in the Pacific Ocean. And they also did nuclear testing in Australia. And an awful lot of the material associated with the court case that I've been doing, and another court case, a very big court case in the Royal Courts of Justice in London, which I was involved in, involves looking at secret material, because the government keeps a lot of this material secret and it won't allow anybody to look at it. Well, I was leaked, about a year ago, I was leaked some documents which showed the composition of the uranium that was used in the British nuclear bombs. And in fact, you might not think that this was a secret, because I mean, this document was written a long time ago, and the bomb testing was done prior in 1957, from 1952 to 1957, very long time ago. So the question is, how could this possibly be a secret? But I can tell you that as soon as we produced this document in court, everybody jumped up, and the judge was told not to look at it, and we were told that we had to give this document back or else we'd be sent to jail. And at the time I said, well, no, this is a public interest document and I'm not going to give it back, you have to send me to jail. And then I ran away to France with the document. And actually I used the document to light the fire on the boat. But I was pursued by the Ministry of Defence, by MI5, by Men in Black. I was sent threats that said that I would be locked up, that the French police would arrest me on my boat and lock me up over Christmas. And all of my friends who had the document were visited by the Men in Black, and they were forced to give this document back. And I'm not allowed to tell you what was in the document because they'll send me to jail. And at the moment, I'm doing quite well in the courts without having to have extra layers of complication. But I can tell you that the document had to do with ultimately the concern was to do with the interaction between the Americans and the British over the period of the nuclear weapons testing. And what we can take from the document, and which I intend to tell you now, although maybe they will lock me up, is that it showed that there was very close collaboration between the Americans and the British in the development of nuclear bombs and hydrogen bombs, these big megaton weapons. And that wasn't supposed to happen, so my feeling is that that probably is the main reason why they wanted to get hold of this document and so forth, but I can't give you any real details about it, or at least I don't intend to. So there we are, this is what I was asked to talk about. I mean, the moral of that story is this, that there are systems behind the systems that you see. And so the operation of the development of nuclear weapons and the use of nuclear weapons is shrouded in massive secrecy, just as the operation of nuclear power stations and nuclear energy and nuclear propulsion on submarines and all of these things are shrouded in massive secrecy. And this is wrong. This is wrong because as members of countries, we should be politically represented by our governments, and we should not be kept in the dark about the sorts of things that they do. It should all be open and free, this knowledge. We should know why it is that these governments are doing what they do. And it's morally wrong, and if you like, in my mind, it's a contravention of human rights to have governments that represent us conducting operations which might result in our death, and certainly does result in our ill health and increases in cancer rates and so forth, without our permission. And we don't give this permission. Well, here we are then. That was more or less all I wanted to say about that, and you can now listen to the Diggers song. And here we go. let's grow this earth divided, we will make whole. First will be a common treasury for all. The sin of property we do disdain. No one has any right to buy and sell the earth for private gain. By theft and murder they stole the land. Now everywhere they'll all stand up at their command. They make the laws to chain us well. The clergy dazzle us with heaven, or they damn us into hell. We will not worship the God they serve, the God of greed who makes rich men and poor men starve. We work, we eat together, we need no swords. We will not bow down to the landlord or pay rent to the lords. We are free men, though we are poor. You diggers all stand up for glory, stand up now. The men of property, the orders came. They sent the hired men and troopers to tear down the diggers' claim, destroy their property and burn their corn. They were dispersed, but still the vision lingers on. Ye poor, take courage, ye rich, take care. This world was made a common treasury for every man to share. All things in common, all people one. They were dispersed, but still the vision lingers on.
It's so beautiful. So beautiful, Chris. Thanks so much. Could you please switch to the video then? Okay. It brings one to tears. So beautiful. This nickel harper is singing for us. And I would like to encourage our listeners just to play all sorts of instruments. Even if you can't, just get them and start playing them. And that's what Christopher Busby does. He just buys all sorts of instruments and he plays them, and he has never taken any school. And I just wanted to encourage you too. That's very resourceful for the development of all sorts of dimensions of soul. So in music we thrive. And I'll start my session with this peaceful sound. So I have a very eminent guest from Sweden that we're starting with, and that is Henning Witte, who will tell us about how to reform banking system. He is a German lawyer and he has been researching on very different subjects. He is well known all over the world on the subject of research of Estonia ferry that sunk more than a decade ago, probably already 20 years ago. And he did research on various conspiracy theories, so-called, where Russian military were involved, and New World Order military generally, in sinking more than 700 peaceful citizens on ferry Estonia. But he has a fabulous web page that is called White TV. So let's have him see his web page so you can find it. So if you could zoom in that White TV upstairs there. This is a brilliant education resource, White TV, by Henning Witte. And here you can zoom in his name, yeah? And there is a whole world, if you go through under pages of this page, and circles of videos. My favorite is Financial Crisis, Way Out. A lot of it is in Swedish, but here you can see in English too. No, this side is in English. White School of Economics. He has really researched the field, as he is a brilliant researcher, and gives you crucial issue topics here, as well Okay, let's call him now and let him introduce himself, the subject. Don't show my Skype to them.
Hello.
Hello, Henning. We are so blessed to have you with us in our conference of systems of nuclear war criminalization. And I would like to introduce you to the subject so you can understand what we're doing here. We've been working here for 2 days already, going through the matrix of these systems and having some international talkers from Belarus and UK. And today we are digging into the system of financial base for nuclear war. And of course everything is sort of embedded in the financial system of the planet right now. And as I know, you have some interesting suggestions how to reform that financial system. And that's why we would like to hear your presentation. I have already showed the conference attendants your webpage, YTV, just generally, sort of, but I would like you to maybe bring us further.
Yes. Well, I started my TV actually because I wanted to promote my thoughts about the banking reform. It is very interesting that it is very interesting that the whole world is having the same devilish banking system. There is not one country having a better system. That is an indication that there is one central force in power, and that is the banks, the international banks, especially those in Wall Street. And the negative parts of the banking system of today is that every money which is issued, would it be coins and cash, or would it, which is only about 4% or 5% of the money from today. So it's not so important. The huge majority of the money is digital money. And the digital money is in all countries of the world produced by private banks mainly, and not from the central banks as people should imagine, because when it comes to cash it is the central banks having the monopoly to do it. But so is not the case with the majority of the money, which is digital money only living in our computers. And the problem there is that today every single money which is created, would it be US dollar, Canadian dollar, or Latvian lat, which they left, unfortunately they should have stayed in the Latvia, or the euro, whatever currency you take in China, the same shit in Russia, everything is born in form of a credit. That means you must always think over the whole country, or the whole world. If everybody in the world, or everybody in Latvia, or everybody in the euro countries would pay back their debts, then no money would be in circulation. Already this shows how sick the system is.
Yeah, it's quite fraud.
Yes, and in former times, when we had the gold standard, the money was backed up with gold. Today it is backed up with debt. Only debt and nothing else. And the horrible thing here is that the banks give you a loan, but they not only want back the loan, the money for the loan, but they want back interest as well. And the money for the interest is never created. When you pay interest, you never think in those terms. You earn some money and you pay the interest every month to your bank. But you never realize that you take the money which is for repaying the loan itself to pay the interest, because the interest was never created. The banks create only loans, the loan amount, but not the amount for the interest. This is like the game with the musical chairs. The chair for the interest is not there. Everybody has to compete in the society all over the world about an amount of money which is too small. Nobody, if you take all, is able to pay back all the loans and the interest, because the interest is not created. And this creates a constant scarcity of money in all the societies. And this makes that in all societies, by mathematical reasons, somebody has to go bankruptcy, has to fail. And that is a very
built into the system, yeah.
Very, very sick system, because you can struggle and struggle and struggle and be very good and skillful, as they are in Greece, for example. There are not bad people there, but it's always one who is the first to fall. In Europe, in the European countries, it is Greece. Very close to Greece is Portugal and Spain and France and all the others. Not Germany and Finland and Holland, but all the others. and that is the result of a criminal banking system. Because it is criminal, it is a Ponzi scheme. And the criminal part is the lack of interest money forces people to take new loans, because this is the only channel to get to new money, because money is only issued as loans, as debt. So then, because there is no money for the interest, you force people to be new bank slaves, to take new loans, and the demand or the lack of money is rising in an exponential way. The higher the lack of the interest money, the bigger the demand, and this is an exponential development. And all exponential developments need to crash and are not healthy. In the atomic branch where you discuss, an atom bomb has an exponential development. The cancer in the body has exponential development. This is not natural, and this must crash and go down, and therefore we have always those big financial crashes in several years. Globally seen, it is between 70 and 80 years. The last huge crash was the first huge crash after the gold standard was 29, 30, 31, 32. And then they could build up the system globally again, and then it crashed harshly 2008. Now there are new bubbles building up, and we expect very soon that this new bubble, which is bigger than this before 2008, is crashing again. And there's another reason why it's a Ponzi scheme, because in this system you shuffle up worth to those being in the top of the banking pyramid. It is always a pyramid structure in the Ponzi schemes. And those in the top of the pyramid, those who started the Ponzi schemes, in our case the banks, are always the winners. And, in the Ponzi scheme you need always new members to participate. That's why they push every household into new debt and debt. Just today in Sweden the newspapers are full of the fact that the private households are deeply in debt compared to other countries that are in the top of the world. And this is typical for a Ponzi scheme, that you always need new supply, but when it's finished, because the earth is not infinitive and people are not infinitive, it's only 7 billion, then it must crash, because you can't recruit new people.
And what I found very important in your theoretical analysis of the situation was the mentioning of expropriation of resources by banking.
Yes,
cartels.
because in reality, those being in power, they are not interested in money. They are interested in wealth, in things, in gold, in land, in mines where they can take uranium and things like that.
Uranium, yeah.
Yes. And there I figured out it's almost 8 different secret means how the banking system is picking money from you, expropriating you. Very obvious is the fact that when you take a loan, you have to give a collateral, a security. For example, mortgaging your house. When you fail to pay the mortgage, then the bank is taking the house. When you got the mortgage, the loan for the house, the bank didn't work for it. The bank only printed it in the computer screen, some figures, that's the money you shall have, and then you can buy the house. But when it fails, the bank gets the house. This is the real value, and you got only fake value. There you see how they suck in real value into the system and expropriate you. And then it is in this system that this is always made more money because it is so easy to make money for the banks. They just print it in their computer. There is more money created than people work, and therefore you have the inflation. And the inflation is eating up your accounts, your savings. And this is also a kind of taking money from you to the system.
Yeah.
And then the third level is that the states take loans by private banks, which is totally crazy. The state should take a loan, if any, by central banks, their own central bank. And then the interest is paid to the community, not to private banks.
That is the systemically criminal part of it, isn't it?
It's one of them.
Yeah, and that is where we can do reform.
Yeah, I will come to the reform.
Great.
So this is one of them, because if you look to the United States, there is one country in the United States which is not writing red figures, which is not in debt so much, and which is very well developed. This is North Dakota.
Sorry, I couldn't hear it.
North Dakota, a state in the United States, up in the far west north, close to Canada. What happened in 1919? It's almost 100 years ago. Swedish settlers founded the Bank of North Dakota, a state-owned bank, and this state-owned bank always issued money to the state of North Dakota and gave very good loans to the population, to the farmers and so on. And the interest being paid is coming into the state and poured out to the people again. And therefore this state is developing very well. And all the other states in the United States don't have this system, and their bankruptcy principle, like Chicago, Detroit, those parts there, Michigan, and California principally also. And now there is a discussion in the United States to make it like North Dakota. Latvia should do the same, like North Dakota. Have a state-owned bank issuing the credits for the state, so that the state is not forced to take loans from private banks, and then the state is forced to rise taxes more, because the interest must be paid with the taxes. And with this tool of the taxes, you also take money from the people. Nobody thinks about it, that this is not necessary.
Yeah.
And then the fourth level is that in every product you buy, at least 30% of the cost is interest. Sometimes it's more, it depends on the product. Because everybody who needs money to make the product has to pay some interest somewhere, because that's the way money is coming into society. So if we would have a healthier system, nobody had to pay those 30 or more percent in the product prices. And that means if we would have a good system, as mine, I call it the White School of Economics, then we would produce cheaper than China, because then we would not need the Chinese labor and ship the products back to Europe. It costs more than if we would produce here without the bankings always taking in money without giving notice to it for us. And then you have levels for other levels in the case the system is collapsing. So the four levels I just mentioned is always in this system inbuilt. But now we have a crisis. We saw it in 2008 when the Lehman Brothers crashed in 9/11, 2008. Then it was four new levels of expropriations. The first argument was the banks are too big to bail out. That means they said, oh, Morgan and all those huge crook banks, they need tax money, your money, to be saved, because if they go bankruptcy, then everything is collapsing in society, and therefore society has an interest to give tax money to that, which is totally bullshit, because all the central banks have their filials, smaller parts all over the country, where they can supply the money for the society. So it is not right what they have said. They have lied to people. We need those banks. That is nonsense. We don't need them. The central banks could take over the money supply if the other banks fail. But in practice it is so that the private banks have the power behind the curtain. Therefore Goldman Sachs is in every American government, be it Democrats or Republicans, that's no different, because they are in charge, and therefore they lie to people, and therefore they force the taxpayers, with the help of the politicians, to bail them out. That means that they can do take any risk. If it's good, they cash in and keep the money. If it's bad, they let the people pay for it. They call it moral hazard. And
that is system, isn't it?
Yeah, it is very stupid. And it is only in favor for them, because they are in power, they made it so. And then it was the bailout. And then came a new level, the bail-in. And bail-in is first practiced in Cyprus 2013. There they said, oh, we have a huge banking crisis, and the thought was, a lot of Russians have deposited their money there, we want that. And then they said, yes, we have to save the banks, we make a bail-in, we must force all the customers of the bank to pay to save the banks. So they forced, overnight, I think it was about 55% of every bank account was confiscated to this bank to save them. So your savings are not safe any longer, because now they took this model and made secret rules in Europe that in a new crisis which is very close to come, they can go to the Latvian people, the Swedish people, the German people, and say, your bank has trouble, the bank needs 50% of what you have on your account. In Cyprus this was horrible. Even the companies which just got in money in their accounts to pay the payments for the workers, for the labor, they got confiscated more than 50%. They couldn't pay out the payments, the monthly payments for the
keeping your money with the robbers, yeah? Yeah.
So this is bail out and bail in, which is coming when the crisis is there. And then there are two additional levels. This is, you say, in reference to a country, it is too big to fail. You can't let it go down. They made it with Greece. They said, Greece is so important. We need that Greece keeps and stays within the Euro and the European Union, and therefore all the other taxpayers from the other countries have to pay to save Greece, which is also rubbish. And the fourth level is there is no good name in English, I know. It's a money reform. Germany had that 3 times in the last century. After World War I, the financial system in Germany collapsed because the Wall Street made naked short sellings on the Reichsmark. So this huge inflation which Germany had after World War I was not triggered so much by war debts or things like that, but it was triggered deliberately by Wall Street with naked short selling, which should be forbidden. In Europe they started to forbid it. Angela Merkel from Germany took that up some years ago, but in the United States it is still allowed. It is a very criminal tool, this naked short selling.
Can you tell it once more? I couldn't get it. We have a bit bad
it's
sound.
So-called naked short selling. That means when they now attacked the Russian ruble in December 2014, or the German Reichsmark in October 1923. Then the Wall Street, the big banks, they sell Russian ruble or Reichsmark, which they don't have. You can do it with pork bellies, with oil, whatever you want. You sell things you don't have in huge amounts. And of course, then they count it as if it would be, and then the price is falling. And then they make speculations against it. The price is falling, and then they cash in because the speculation went well. If a usual person would sell something they don't have and never could give, it is called fraud. But they are allowed to do it, and they should not be allowed to do it. That is a very, very criminal tool the Wall Street is always using.
That is Wall Street, yeah? That is
Yes.
the criminal system that Wall Street does.
Yes, but in England they have it as well. And Britain refused to acknowledge, to forbid snake short selling, as far as I know. But Angela Merkel and France introduced it into the European rules.
Okay, fabulous analysis, Henning. Thanks so much.
And there you have, in Germany, you had the first crash of the financial system. They introduced a totally new kind of money. And this was done after World War II as well, when the Reichsmark crashed the second time. They started with the D-Mark, and then it was the eastern parts of Germany, GDR, they had the same system. Their money collapsed totally and was swapped out to a new system. In Germany, after World War II, it was so horrible that you got a very bad rate for the old money to get new money. But there was a totally different rate if you had bank loans in the old systems. There, it was better rate for the banks than compared to the usual swap. And this is a risk which a lot of countries have now, also, that everything is crashing and they have to start from scratch with a totally new currency.
And you mentioned also uranium, and as you are a lawyer, I wanted to ask you about what do you think about this arrangement of Euratom Treaty that was sort of signed. That is the start of European Union agreement.
Euratom, yes.
Because it was signed before European Union, sort of 5 years after, exactly 5 years after the so-called winning of Second World War on the 9th of May 1950, they signed Euratom.
Yes.
And through which they achieved the rights to all the uranium in the countries that are in that treaty.
Yes. All those treaties are based on Nazis. The Nazis under Hitler already had plans for that. The whole European Communion has Nazi rules. But this is not the topic just now. I would prefer...
It sort of is. It sort of is.
Yeah, it is.
Because tomorrow we will be having the day when we will discuss the law and how to criminalize. And to criminalize, you need to know the law, yeah?
Yes.
And
but now
you
we are
are a brilliant lawyer, that's why.
But now we are shifting the topic.
Yeah, okay.
We can take that later on.
Yeah.
Because I just pointed out the flaws in the system.
Okay.
And now it is important to say how do we make it better.
Yeah.
And there it is the first thing, you must take away the power from the private banks to issue money. You have to nationalize the money, but not the banks as the communists did. That is not okay. The banks may be private, but banks may only loan money which somebody else created. That means the central bank, the people. That means you have to rise the amount of own capital in the banks to 100%. Today it is European rules. It is between 4 and 8%. When Latvia had its big crisis, I think it was in 2009, I wrote a lot of letters to the financial minister, to the Minister of State, to journalists, to the trade unions, suggesting them you can easily get out of your crisis if you rise this capital requirements for the banks from 4% to 100% and issue your own money in the Central Bank of Latvia. I did not even got one answer, not one thing or nothing, because all the guys, all the politicians and bankers are under severe mind control, mostly from Sweden. Therefore, so much Swedish banks have raped Latvia.
That's right, almost all of them.
Yes, they are very criminal. And there you have to rise to 100%. And the interesting thing is the European Union rules, the laws from the European Union, the Commission, say that you are allowed to rise the level.
You're allowed to rise
the level of how the capital requirements are for the banks. Today it's between 4 and 8%. They never thought about 100% as I suggest. But for example, in Great Britain, when the crash with the Lehman Brothers came in 2008, they rose it to 9% from 4%. This is of course a little bit better, but you have to rise 100%. That means,
why not?
100% means the banks have no possibility to create own money. That is very easy. The rules are there. You must only go if you are a state and rise it. Now Latvia has the problem. They joined the euro, which was a very stupid thing to do, especially after the bad experiences from Estonia some years ago from 2010. And now Lithuania is joining, but they are all under mind control, and therefore they do such stupid things.
Yeah.
And now Latvia is not able to save themselves, because if you are in the euro, you can't do those things on your own. Sweden still can, Great Britain can, Switzerland can. This is those countries who are most convenient to make a monetary reform. And this is one important thing. Rise it to 100%, that means nationalize the money. Then the money has to be issued by the central bank, as the cash is done, and as the most people think is the case.
And we had it in Latvia in the period 1920 to 1940.
It is possible, yes.
Yeah, we had it.
And then you must make a reform of your constitution. The central bank has to be totally independent from all the other powers. So in Germany, they developed the word monetative. That means the central bank has to be totally independent from the parliament, the courts, and other powers in the society. And that means every 6th year, I propose, it could be 4 or 7 or whatever, you have national elections electing the staff of the central bank, the leading people, the board. This is at least as important as the elections for the new government. Because those people who are in charge of making money, issuing money, they have the power. And therefore it's today the private banks, and therefore we have no democracy.
So you suggest referendum, yeah? Or what was it?
No, not a referendum, election.
Election.
You need to change the constitution. That takes a little time. Because usually it's 2 periods of sessions.
Yeah.
But then when you have changed the constitution, the central bank, it's an own pillar, power pillar, not dependent on the government, the parliament, or the courts. It is something new, a 4th dimension in the constitution, the 4th pillar. And there the people vote who is leading it, who is in charge. Because then the central bank says, okay, we issue a certain amount of money for Latvia or for this country, we are just central bank for, and then the politicians have to decide how they spend it, as it is today. So there is a huge difference when you have the new system. And then the next question is, how much money shall the central bank issue? If they issue too much money, you have inflation, as we have today, because the private banks don't bother what the interest of the society is. They only look to their own interest. And therefore they produce too much money because they earn money by making it out of nothing and taking interest for it. So either you make too much money, then you have the inflation, or you make not enough money, as we had in the gold standard before. It is the huge disadvantage of the gold standard. The gold standard is better than what we have now, but not good. There you have deflation problems. That means you have not enough money compared to what people are working or willing to earn. So how much money shall the central bank issue? And there I come with a new idea, nobody had it before me in the world. You shall back up the money not with gold, as in former time, not with debt, as nowadays, but with the labor, with the working force. Because for me, money is the counterpart of labor. Money is given for people who haven't done labor. And money is not a commodity or something like that. Money is a special dimension, paying for labor. And therefore it is so sick in our system. Every labor payment, every wage you get is a loan. So principally you are not supposed to keep it because the loan has to be paid back. That is very sick. When you pay, when you work and get payment, there should be no force to take the money away from you. You should keep it.
Yeah.
And therefore the central bank shall back up the money with the labor. That means they only issue as much money as there is work, as people are willing to work.
There are various theories in that direction, though.
No,
But it's great that you grab it properly.
And I haven't found any theories in that. They are sometimes close to, but nobody really postulated it that way. And nobody gave this definition of money, that it is a counterpart or counter, I don't know the special English word for it, from money. It is
equivalence?
Equivalence, yes, no, it's prestation. I don't know.
Nevertheless, yeah, anyway, that has to be done. There are very good solutions how to get out of this trap in that area.
And this is easy to do because you can go by the rules which are now. You only have to change the constitution that you have the central bank independent from all the other powers, which is not the way today. And the people elect the board of the central bank.
Yeah.
And then the central bank is looking at how much work is done or wants to be done. Then we will supply the money for that. That means you will never have a lack of money in this society, and you will never have unemployment in this society. Because as quick as somebody wants to work, and it's not a nonsense, of course, then the society supplies the money for them. So in future times, there's not a lack of money, but a lack of skilled workers.
Yeah. Okay.
And no unemployment.
So it's nationalize money, reform constitution, create the fourth pillar. Is there anything more you suggest in the reform?
Yeah, and rise, yes, nationalizing money. That is mean rising the capital requirements for banks up to 100%.
Yeah.
And principally that's it.
That's a great reform, really.
Yeah.
And actually it's not that complicated. It's just some issues that have to be
And in the transition time, if you now change the system from now to the future, you have to build in a mechanism that the banks have to give back what they robbed from the people. And this is very elegantly done by the following thing. About 95% of the bank's loan is created by themselves. There's nothing from the central bank or central bank. There they cheated the people. And therefore, every bank must be obliged to loan this money they cheated from the central bank. It is easy to do, it's only a computer transaction. So suddenly the banks are in debt to the central bank and have to pay interest on it. And by that, you put value back from the banking system to the central bank, to the people. You must not rise too much that they go bankruptcy, that's not necessary, but a little bit, that they have to give back what they robbed from the people. And then some politicians and some bankers, being very rich, like the Wallenbergs in Sweden and so on, they have to be expropriated. They have so much power behind the curtain, there you need to take all the money away from them and give it to the people.
But the mechanism you suggest is to give it back to the central banks, yeah?
Yeah, because
that are elected by the people.
Yes, the money which they invented without any law allowing to do that. There's no law in any country which says, yes, the private banks are allowed to do it. They just took that.
Yeah, yeah.
And therefore, this money they cheated the people with, where were no capital requirement behind, they have to loan that from the central bank and pay interest on it. And this interest is giving back money from the bankings to the central bank to the people.
Very interesting mechanism, really. This was.
Yeah. It's easy to do.
I haven't heard about this one before. This is very.
It's also my invention, and those 8 levels of expropriation nobody talks about either.
This is fabulous, Henning. We are so lucky you are.
And it is very interesting.
Humanity.
Very interesting. On the 31st of March this year, 2015, in Iceland, little Iceland, there was one politician came in with a suggestion, being very close to what I suggested. In Iceland, they orientated to the American research, to Bill Still, Alan Hodgson Brown, lawyer in California, and Stephen Salenga, a very good guy who was a broker, stockbroker in Zurich in Switzerland, which is now in America. He has the American Monetary Institute. And they have similar thoughts like me, but I'm the first really making a total complete building of it. Therefore I call it the White School of Economics.
Yeah.
And in Iceland now it is the first time in the world that a politician, a parliament got a suggestion which is really healthy. Because there is some other danger in this discussion, which is not so much known in Latvia or in Sweden, but if you are in Germany, Switzerland, Austria, or in the United States, it is very much discussed, the so-called Austrians, the Austrian School of Economics. This is very old, it's from the last, from the 19th century, in the last years there. So it's more than 100 years old, the Austrian School of Economics. Ludwig von Mises and Hayek and those. And they say, oh, the money has to be privatized. No state has to interfere with money. There must be free competition about money. It is today, because there is competition between the dollar and the euro and so on, and the Chinese money and so on. Those guys basically propagate the gold standard. And they are built up by the banks already in the 19th century, that if this system crashes and fails, which of course must be by mathematical reasons we just discussed, then they have their reserve solution, the controlled opposition, the Austrian School of Economics. And then it is a little bit better, but not good, because if you reintroduce the gold standard, guess who is sitting on all the gold today?
No, of course.
It's the people in power already.
Already, yeah.
And then you would not shift the power, and therefore they launch. Don't listen to the Austrian School of Economics, that's a hoax. They are lying about a lot of things.
Yeah.
It's the banks behind, because they want to save their positions.
Yeah.
So the only thing is to nationalize money